All right, so this first one, James, we have Amanda performing the 18-minute AMRAP of 15 box jump step downs at 20 inches. We have 12 shoulder overhead, and we have 9 toe to bar.
Yeah, this is an original CrossFit Open workout, 2012. That's why it's called 12.3. We had subsequently looked back over so many years in coaching those individuals in the sport and tried to come up with a test that was well-rounded in dynamic contractions that was fairly lengthy in terms of average time. And 12.3 always kind of was simple enough to do and highlighted a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So that's why I always found interesting about 12.3 and using it as a test. Thoughts
on solid scores, because I know you dig into this one in mixed modal.
Yeah.
So as a KPI, what are some solid scores that people that should be doing this test should be looking at?
Yeah, 11 rounds. When you get into 420, 430, 440 and higher reps, it's really just it's just fun up at, not meaning it's fun and enjoyable at that point, but that's a big time separator. There's a whole ton of people that who participate in the sport that get around 400.
Yeah.
But when you go north into the fours, you got the gas on the entire time. Like your only limitation is that you have to transition between movements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this one.
That's why I like it though.
Yeah, this one embodies the thing that you always say of like how do we make dynamic contractions aerobic?
Yeah.
This is such a perfect test for that, just because yes, these contractions are fairly dynamic, but they're so low barrier.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the limitation is going to be what is your capacity? You know, outside of like, you know, are you too hot? Are you not breathing? Are you not doing this? Are you not doing that? It's like the barbell is super light. It's not a complex movement. You're jumping on a box, you're stepping down, and you're doing a couple toe to bar.
Yep.
Where, I mean, I've done this test a lot, and I've seen a lot of athletes do this test. And this is one where you find people that are good, they just get into a flow, right? Like before you know it, you're 7 rounds in.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at the clock and you're like, okay, how can I actually keep this up or get a little bit faster so I can get those 10, 11, 12 rounds in on this?
Yeah, and that strategy you're just speaking of is the people that are just relatively really good in the sport. You know, doesn't mean they'll win any of the competitions, but for the sport, they're doing really good. Because what happened in this particular one with Amanda, and we see with a number of people who are just trying to figure out where things are right now, she starts fractioning the shoulder to overhead in round 5. And she did, I think, 11 rounds total, or close to 11 rounds total. So just your point, you know, is like at that point in time, round 5, 6, 7, you know what's ahead, and you just make the decision. Do I put the pedal down?
Yeah.
Or do I I know I can't do that, so I start to brake a tiny bit.
Yeah.
And for some people it changes, you know, for her it was shoulder overhead. For some people they can't maintain the 9 toes to bar in a row. The box jump step down is fairly similar the whole time, or same in pattern. So I wanted to add a point too to what you'd mentioned, the kinds of contractions, if we watch Amanda do it as well. I mean, just think about what's the bigger motor units being used in that movement right there, which is shoulder overhead. It's basically just leg extension, right? So sure, your shoulders have to take a brunt of the load based upon how it all adds up over time, but that's it. And then the toes to bar is a big full body flexion action, right? So it's spinal flexion and extension plus being, you know, having grip being some proponent of it, but just things to think about. And then for the box jump, it's hip extension. So some of the things that are missing in there that generally cause a really higher power output, that people could say, well, is it really a good test of capacity because it doesn't have all those moments? It's not higher load. It doesn't have arm bending or squatting patterns in it. And that's something to take into consideration for how much power is different than like an overhead squat, chest to bar, 18-minute AMRAP versus this one. So I just wanted to add that they're make it easy. Oh, look at this guy helping out. Oh, got some coaching going on. Well, this is illegal happening right now, fixing the weights.
James is fixing weights.
I'm in here fixing weights and kind of just positioning it effectively and saying hello to Henry.
And wearing the Birks.
Yeah, which is AG's new little dog, just sitting there.
Named after Henry Toronto. I don't care if she admits that or not, but it is.
It ends in I, so it's not.
He's French.
Yeah. Then it's Henri.
Andre. And another thing to point out is the original version of this workout was a push press, and we're allowing the shoulder to overhead in this. So you can see Amanda kind of navigating between the push jerk and the push press. That last set especially, I think she hit, and then there she goes again with the push jerk to just try to save her shoulders a little bit.
Yeah, she did 6 and 6 from round 5 or 6 onward, and then was, in my opinion, knowing Amanda and her history, just did a marvelous job of, I mean, she's always dealing with every session that she's always done with maintaining correct pace. Yeah. That's always her, like, how do I maintain and keep this going? How do I, like, every rep is surrounded based on that. So her breathing during this and her output and knowing when to pace just shows her maturity over time of knowing when to push and back off and etc. With regards to just energy systems in general, let's talk a little bit about that. In the context of time domains. So for 18 minutes, you could think about this, that it really is, it's moving into, to use your words, I guess, not to call it something different, but sustainable contractions made, or dynamic contractions made sustainable. But an important consideration there is watching split times for this time frame will help people determine, like, where they're sitting in this energy system training. So if people are trying to get anything from this, it's 18 minutes, as we always say, doesn't mean anything at all, unless it's the modality and the person and the intentions that are inside of it. If you look at the scores after this, you'll see that she averaged like 130 to 140 per rounds, right? So that's something that people, if they want to do this, because anyone could, if you can do all the movements, just look at your split times over time with the maximal output for 18 minutes, and that will give you at least a little bit of indication as to where you sit on this potential for like that time frame of energy system training.
So if Amanda came off, let's say Amanda...
Almost like a 5K run with dynamic contractions. Yeah. That's the way you should look at it.
Yep.
It's like, how do I...
Let's say Amanda came off of this, or she finished this 18 minutes and she's like, hey, James, my legs are blown up. So now we're starting to talk about, okay, we want her to make dynamic contractions aerobic, and there's some muscle endurance limitations happening in the legs with Amanda on this. Not saying that she said that, but what would your response be to that, or what would the shift be in thinking of what you need to give her to get better at this test? If this was the goal, it's like, I need you to get as good as you possibly can at this test.
Yeah, well, the simple answer that's broad, so people are listening in to think about how do I get better if I get that, is you always got to ask the question, what possibly led to that limitation occurring in the test? And so you would ask questions of previous training, experience in the skills, pacing capability, and this subjective area is important too. What were you thinking about going in? What was your strategy component? Just so you can feel into sensitivities, like what's actually happening. As example, we worked out on the weekends or this weekend, and you may not have noticed it, but you were like hesitant to do like lower body something or other from what you did the day before. And you're giggling now, but you performed really well on the day. You see what I'm saying? So that has to be taken into consideration, right? To kind of feel out like, well, how are people going to perform based upon previous training? On top of that, let's make it really simple. Then you would just take the skill, the particular thing that you believe caused the occlusions or the fatigue or et cetera, repetitions or whatever, and you just back up a little bit and say, have I put this skill into a progressive skill format? Right? So have you, well, I'll make it real simple, hopefully not be long. Have you made the skill and trained it all by itself and got a really good job of it? And then did you start putting it with other things and added volume to it and then got good at that? And then did you put it with a bunch of other things and added volume to it and got good at that? You know what I'm saying? That's where you generally have to go with the
and then
limitations.
On your skill comment as well, this will be my last piece. On your skill comment, I think that's a perfect way to put it, because imagine if and Amanda's her technique is, I haven't seen anything wrong quite yet, but let's say that Amanda was riding forward and she was on her toes every single shoulder overhead, and she complains of fatigue in the quads, and it's like, okay, Amanda, you just did 136 shoulder overhead and every single one of them were on your toes. It's like, we may need to back this up, and we need to perfect the skill of being able to do a shoulder overhead without you being on your toes. So I think
alone, just by itself.
So I think looking at what's actually happening right here is also an important thing. And I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago as well. It's like, What if it was her left quad because she was stepping down with her left leg every single repetition, 15 times 11? I think those are the little things that a lot of people don't really think about. They're just like, how do I get fitter? How do I get faster? And they're like, okay, maybe it's breathing, maybe it's fueling. And it's like, no, man, look at the movement. Do you see anything wrong with the movement itself?
Yeah, it's tough to use Amanda in all those. No, but just put it on a scale, right, of capacity versus technique. She has to be perfect in all of her stuff. Has to be, because on the capacity end, she doesn't have the embedded ability. Yeah. Right? So, and that just is what it is, right? We could go on and on about where that comes from and how did it develop. But that's why you could see with her stuff, she's so, like, trying to be so eloquent, because she hates to spit off energy, because she know it leads to a lack of capacity. Just on your point of, like, could it be, you know, if it was legs, then it's most likely a true capacity issue with Amanda. Just use her as an example.
Because movement is so good.
It's not limitations or, oh, here's the cheater again.
Oh, there you go.
Cheater coach.
Fixing it. I thought you'd put on, if these were burpees, you'd probably have those little Eleiko plates on here. All right.
Shoulder overhead, it's more to pick up.
Let's
do, right?
RX plus.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to the end and kind of see what Amanda looks like going to the finish line. So you can see her, right? The rate, I know we just went right to the last couple reps, but the rate, she obviously knew how much time she had on the clock. Cheater coach is coming back in, and you can start to see that she picks that rate up the last 15, 30 seconds, whatever that is. But if you look at her from the outside looking in,
I think she's got one more round.
From the outside looking in, you don't really notice that much of a difference round 10 versus round 1 with her.
It's at this point I said 1 minute too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also an important thing to consider. Or at a time where she knew she could probably get. So she goes unbroken here. I think this is the last round. 5.
Yeah, she's moving.
6. Yeah, 7. Oh no, this is not slide. You went back far enough where.
Okay.
Anyways, in the last round she goes unbroken with the shoulder overhead. There we go.
Should be this one, right?
Yep. Yeah, so you can see that. Yeah, she goes directly into 12. Yeah.
What do you take from having that amount of gas at the end? Like in strategy?
Yep, I mentioned that to her as well. I said it's actually for what's important to her right now, which is doing the open and feeling like she successfully completed each one to like the best she could. That's our biggest goal. I just said, like, for refinement, you're almost there on exactly how much, like, little bit more output you could put into the middle rounds. Yeah. And she recognized that too. So I'm not sure if we have it on video, but yeah, like that finish there for Amanda is, oh, ironically we have sound that just came on. So that's perfect, right? That's about 30 seconds later, right?
Yeah.
Like classic 18-minute AMRAP for someone who has to have perfect technique and is challenged on capacity to get 400 reps. I'm impressed with that. Based upon the timing, because all that takes is, like we talk about in developing athletes and their competitive format for the open, is going in with confidence and going in with an opportunity for an unknown. We call it the magic. I'm not really sure if you're going to be able to do it, but it's nice going in knowing you got a little bit there that you could, like, open up, rip the kimono off, and then have a good outcome. So. Yeah.
In a piece like that, it's so this, James, and it's a long time, right? Like 18 minutes to do this. What athletes or whatever she's thinking while going through that is also important. So just understanding, like, what's in her head when she hits 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you know what I mean? And then finishing off.
Yes.
Is there any insights into what's inside of Amanda's head inside of pieces like this? And I asked that because I
think Amanda's laughing too. She hears this, like, you don't want to get inside my head. I'm sure that's what she's saying. It's probably something like, my fucking feet, my feet. Or I wonder where my dog is. Or no, it's I think it's over time, it is probably developed, because you asked it personally for Amanda, is to say, am I doing a check-in on my pacing and my awareness, right? What are the, because for her it's control around rhythm.
Yeah.
She wants to have personal control on the rhythm. And you'll see it in all of her previous opportunities where she may still have had absolute great score outcomes, but she didn't feel it was a successful outcome if she lost control.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So for her, inside is like this internal barometer of like, am I in control? Am I in control? Am I in control? Figure out pace, where's my breathing, et cetera. And that's taken a lot of reps for her and a lot of practice. And
it's funny that we mentioned 5 to 7 because you can see rounds 5 to 7 is where she's like, okay, this is where I need to sit to finish this, to have the juice to go 132 on that last one. So
so if you look at numbers, it's probably like a realization around here that she's like, oh, a couple of seconds here and there is going to be helpful. And then you make the decision. And then this round here, I said 5 or 6, I think. So round 6, that's where she started fractioning, and you can see it held steady. And it would have been the same thing, but she knew she had 1 to go, so she finished quick.
Which I don't see anything wrong with this, right? It's like if we're looking at training the aerobic system, maybe we're like, okay, we want all of our splits to be tight. But I think, I don't know if Amanda would have went, let's call this second split, let's say it was 138.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that would have actually, she probably would have found herself behind, right?
No.
Because there was not a lot of times where she was like she was never hands on the knees wasting time. So
that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned the word inside there. I hope people heard it when you said training it, right? So training of the aerobic system, especially for dynamic contractions. There's nothing wrong with using that concept, like how much do you want to complete at 18 minutes and reverse engineering the math around each round, right? But this was a test, so you want them to actually show perfectly a slow degradation of splits. That would be optimal, just based upon stored energy, right? You're starting, you got stored energy, it's okay if you're just doing this slow drop in the process, just so people think it's not perfect. And we tried this in the open 100 times for the people that, there may be an avatar out here we're talking to that understands it, but they gotta make sure every round is like, it's a strategy going in is 4 days long. You know what I mean? Like, I've strategized in my head like 17 times. I think if I go 145 per round, like this is what And then they do the first 2 rounds, and it's 145. And then the third round hits them, and they're 146, and they feel this like, I don't know if I can maintain this, and it just all goes for shit.
The Mike Tyson quote: "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face," right? And that's what a lot of this comes down to.
So that's why there has to be a little bit of freedom allotted to the athlete to say, you got to figure this feeling out, and then with practice, you'll be able to refine that puppy over time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool.